Yeah.
Yep.
Now we're going to be looking at ecosystems in part 2 of our science series. An ecosystem is a community of living organisms interacting with one another and with living parts of the environment they live in. Individuals to populations to communities and now to ecosystems. For example, forest, lake, island, and mountain. We're going to look at trophic relationships, which are feeding connections among living organisms in an ecosystem. And that can be represented by a food chain. For example, producers, consumers, and decomposers. The trophic levels are producers, consumers, and decomposers. Producers are primarily plants in terrestrial ecosystems, such as algae and phytoplankton in aquatic systems. They are autotrophs, self-feeding organisms which convert inorganic, non-living to organic living matter. For example, plants convert carbon dioxide to glucose with the help of solar energy. Autotrophs are at the bottom of the food chain, which introduce energy into an ecosystem. Photosynthesis is the key. Consumers are heterotrophs. They need others for nourishment, and they feed on other living organisms. There are 4 types. Primary, first order, that feed on producers, seeds, fruits, those are called herbivores. And secondary, and third and fourth order consumers, which eat consumers of the preceding order. They're usually carnivores, but can be omnivores. Finally, decomposers are organisms that feed on waste and the remains of other living organisms. They're called detritivores because they feed on dead leaves, wood, animal remains, excrements, etc. Examples are worm, fungi, bacteria, and some insects, and they convert organic matter to inorganic matter. Trophic networks, or food chains, more than one food chain is possible in an ecosystem. This means there are many trophic relationships. Here's an example of a more complex trophic network. What we've learned so far, everything in an ecosystem is connected, and food chains link organisms in ecosystems. Matter and energy are constantly exchanged between organisms. The law of conservation of mass, very important, is that matter cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. Chemical recycling is when decomposers break down organic matter into inorganic matter. This which allows for an endless cycle of exchange in an ecosystem. And we can see the flow of inorganic matter from decomposers down, and then the flow of organic matter as producers transform inorganic matter to organic matter, while decomposers convert organic matter to inorganic matter. Energy flow. Sunlight is the primary source of energy. It is transformed into chemical energy by plants, then passed on to consumers. From one trophic level to another, energy is lost through waste, movement, growth, reproduction, heat, etc. So unlike matter, energy is not recycled, and therefore we need a constant supply from the sun. Primary productivity, another concept, is the amount of new biomass generated by producers. So biomass is the total amount of organic matter in an ecosystem. Primary productivity is important because it tells us how much energy is available to primary consumers and therefore limits the number of organisms that can live in an ecosystem. It's influenced by sunlight, water, nutrients, and finally, temperature. Disturbances are events that damage an ecosystem, leading to the elimination of organisms which can alter the availability of resources. And there are 2 types: natural, environmental, such as storms, flooding, forest fires, volcanoes, and drought, and human, such as litter, logging, oil spills, etc. The final concept, despite natural and human disturbances, ecological succession occurs, which are a series of changes that occur in ecosystems after a disturbance. And it continues until a balance is restored. One small change can alter an entire ecosystem. Thank you.